There are moments in business where you know you should speak up, say the thing, ask for more, set the boundary. And in those moments, your body tells you everything. Your heart starts pounding, your mind starts racing, and suddenly the decision isn't just about what to say. It's about what it might cost you if you say it. Today's conversation is about what it really feels like to find your voice in those moments and what happens when you finally use it. Welcome to Deals with Heels. I'm Debra, your host. LaQuincia is a leadership coach who helps high-achieving women step into their voice, navigate through conversations, and lead with confidence and clarity. Through her work, she supports women in setting boundaries, advocating for their value, and showing up fully in their leadership. I'm so excited to have you on the show, Quincy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Debra. I'm so excited to be here today and just to be able to have this conversation with you and all the listeners. Thank you for having me.
I am really ready to have this conversation. I think we focus a lot on standing up for yourself, and we don't focus on all of the things that happen internally when we do it, how
Yes.
scary it is. And there's a cost to staying quiet, though, that I think is more than the cost of potentially speaking up. And you work with women who are high achieving, top level,
hmm
and they still hold back. What is
Yeah.
it with them that's what's it costing them when they don't speak up?
Well, when you think about it, I think about it in three ways, right? The first part of it is truly the revenue in their business, right? If you are not willing to speak up, then you are missing out on opportunities, collaborations, connections is the first part. I think the second part also leans into having those boundaries, right? And understanding what will or will not work for you. The third part, which to me is the heaviest, is the self-respect, right? When you continually minimize or mute your voice and not speak up in those moments that are really going to be able to ignite change or elevate you to that next level. Sometimes we talk about those stretch moments. That can feel really scary. So if you've come from a background, whether it be social programming, family programming, whatever it may have been, that told you, hey, especially if I can, speaking for myself, sometimes we may have heard, well, children
Hmm.
or women, right? You should be seen and not heard, right? Or you should be thankful just to be invited to the party, even if you know there's more that you want to do, more that you want to contribute. So once you start being willing to say, you know what, I not only want more, I earn and deserve more. My experience should garner me more. But the first person who has to speak up and be willing to do that is you. No one's going to advocate for you better than yourself. Some people will support you, but you have to lead the charge.
You definitely do. And it's so difficult, especially in corporate settings.
hmm
And sometimes for entrepreneurs too, just reaching out, even in a sales environment of asking for the business and feeling uncomfortable, just having that value perspective there. It's so
Absolutely.
important.
Yes, I was recently at a conference this weekend out here in Scottsdale, and we had a whole session about asking for the sale, right? So I think even if you think about it in a corporate environment where you may have traditional sales training, you may go through traditional leadership training, or you are an entrepreneur, right? Whether that means that you are in trade or you're doing something soul based, there's always that bit of anxiety or agita, right? And oftentimes it's coded as, well, I don't want to feel sleazy, right? Well, there's so much sales opportunity before we get to sleazy, right? Maybe we just don't understand the skill or the strategy behind it. And so I think when you get to that place of saying, I want to try a different way, right? Or you've been seeing the people around you accelerate their goals and opportunities. And while you've been a wonderful supporter to everyone in the room, but you are still sitting in that same spot, it's because you're not speaking up for you, but you're probably a wonderful advocate for everyone else around you. So I really center my business on you're great for everyone else. You're great at what you do. However, there's this area to where you are shrinking yourself. And I would love to be able to motivate you and inspire you on how to take the steps that really move you forward as bravely as you do for other people.
I think there's a tendency too to because we don't see the other
Hmm.
people advocate for themselves,
Yeah.
right? We don't
Yeah.
see our coworkers or other businesses and what they're doing to advocate for themselves. And so somehow when we see them advance and excel and do well, we
Hmm.
think somebody's giving something to them that they're not giving to us,
That
right?
tap on the shoulder, right? Like, oh, well, someone will come and tap me and tell me when it's time to raise my hand to get that opportunity. But to your point, what you're not seeing is oftentimes that those conversations or connections are being made in many different places and many different rooms. And number one, if you're not in the room because you're either not willing to step out of your virtual office to come from behind the Zoom screen and really connect with people where you can in person, or just to say, and because I saw this a lot in my corporate life, I am interested in this next role, right? And oftentimes women would say, well, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want anyone else to know I want to do something else. Then how does someone know to help you do something else if you're no longer interested in doing what you want to do? And to me, that's an opportunity loss, right? Because when that
Hmm.
new role may come up or that new business opportunity, that collaboration comes up, you've never expressed any interest in having the desire to do that thing, but then you hold resentment when someone else gets the opportunity and you're wondering, well, why didn't anyone ask me? Well, you never expressed any desire or interest. So what would make someone want to tell you about that opportunity if you've presented satisfaction in what you're currently doing without desire for growth?
Right. I have a great story, real quick story.
Yes.
My former co host, when she left her big job and went out on her own as an entrepreneur, she hadn't really done a lot of sales
Mhm.
necessarily. And so for her, the rejection, getting told no was really difficult. And so she is a very systems kind of person. And she was
Mhm.
like, I am gonna I'm gonna get used to it. I'm gonna harden so that
Mm.
that no doesn't hurt me,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And so she decided that for a month, for 30 days, she was going to everywhere she went and she bought something, she was going to ask if she could have it for free
Mm.
because she's going to get told no, no one's going to give her all this stuff for free. And she's going to get hardened to it and be able to ask for it really easily. And so she did it and it did help. But
Mhm.
you know what, to me, the real moral of the story is that about 30% of the time they gave it to her.
There you go. Look at all the things she might have missed or paid for just
Right.
because you didn't inquire, you
And
didn't
so the
ask.
fact that you don't ask, you don't express interest, you don't speak up, or the basic thing of just asking for the sale or the business
Mhm.
at the end of a sales call, actually asking for it. I mean, just by asking, they gave it
Right.
to her.
And I think what's this also the story in that is she had to go out and develop the reps, right? There are a lot of times when you think about, what you may see in social media or maybe on someone's website, you see a lot of the highlight reels. You see a lot of the yeses, the things that worked out, right? But when you really get into it and you start to understand what your conversion rate may be, right? And how many people you needed to talk to get to that yes, to me, that's where you start to loosen that relationship, that emotional hold that no may have over you. But also, it's an exercise, and I think of discipline, you as a leader or an entrepreneur, because to me, they both can be the same thing at times. Also, making sure that you know how to say no, right? And you know how to receive a no because oftentimes you won't be able to implement and execute on different strategies or things you may want to do to invest in your business. It might be a no, and you might need to learn how to deal with that and release some of the emotion around it.
It is, I call that rejection grief.
You know it.
Because if you work really hard, especially
Mhm.
those longer term sales, higher ticket items, it takes a while to build trust.
Mhm.
And if you are building that trust and you're building this connection and you have in your mind what it's going to be like when you get that client, there's a loss of it when it finally comes. to that
Absolutely.
point if they say no. And
Right.
so there is having to deal with that and fill it up. Get out there, fill it up with some more prospects, right?
Absolutely. And I think, Deborah, even to that point, right? Sometimes we get so focused on wanting to have everything like fully baked and completed, right? Before we sort of set it out to market. And now you don't have any sort of idea of how's the market going to receive. I always say put a little bit out there and see how they respond to it because you might get some quick feedback that will allow for you to iterate while you're still in the process of building the big thing. And, as you can make those incremental changes along the way, it just allows it to be better. But you have to be used, to that end of being okay with it being imperfect, but knowing that you're going to make it better. And that's, I think, sometimes the issue.
And it helps you from being so caught up and invested in this is the way it is because this is the way I built it.
Hmm.
When it's a work in progress and you have that flexibility, then you're not so rigid and you're able to
Yes.
pivot much easier.
Oh, yeah, because you're not and also I can think about all the things, right? When you think about entrepreneurs and we have this privilege of being creative about how we bring economy into our life, right? And what we share with the environment. And sometimes we get very, very possessive. It becomes like a little baby, right? But if it's not demonstrating the value of what it needs to be for other people, then maybe that's not the thing that we need to focus so much time on. And what a great learning it would be to realize that at point two, right? Maybe 2, 3 weeks into something, rather than you've been so focused on this for the last 2, 3 months. I've heard people, I'm still working on it, I'm still working on it. I said, well, have you shared it with anyone to see if they're interested? Oh, well, no, but wait till it's done. It's going to be amazing. Maybe. I don't know. You haven't provided anyone an opportunity to give you any feedback. And I think as an entrepreneur or even someone in leadership, I think I worked for a place that used to say feedback was a gift. And at the time, it was one of those things you'd be like, oh my goodness. But now, as I've been able to mature and age in both years, but wisdom and experience, feedback is a gift because it can help you accelerate and pivot so much more quickly than if you just, keep resting on your own laurels, so to say.
Oh, feedback is gold. And
Yeah.
I tell people the day that you're resentful of your client feedback is the day you've crossed over into burnout. Your
Hmm.
client feedback is gold if you want to keep them
Absolutely.
because they're sharing their problems and their pain with you. And
Absolutely.
so
And they're
you're,
also if they're giving you those little quibs of feedback, it also allows for where you can get better, right? And you may also be able to create something that could solve that next need that they may have if it's within your wheelhouse of how you may serve your client or customers. So to not be hungry for that feedback from your clients is a wild thing to me.
well, and it happens so often,
Yeah.
especially with marketing, right? You're worried and you've got all of your vanity metrics that are up
Hmm.
there and your engagement and your likes and it's always a conversation with me with a client that is, well, we've gotten before 5,000 or however many and they're all so, well, are they the 5,000 people that can do business with you?
Right.
Because visibility is different than results and
Absolutely.
understanding that is so important. And it's the emotional dysregulation of the dopamine hit that social media is hitting
Mm.
you with when you get all those. I get excited to open up and see a YouTube video with 5,000 views on it. I'm all
Right.
excited about that.
Mhm.
But what really matters to me is, did the episode help somebody? Did it
What was the
affect them?
impact? Yeah.
Yes, that's what's
Mhm.
really important to me. And so for them, helping identify what is that for you? And it doesn't matter if only 10 people saw it. If there are 10
Right.
actual prospects that can buy your product that are most
Uh,
likely to buy it, that's the thing.
that's the gold, right? That's the gold nugget that we're looking for because the vanity metrics, right, while they do make us feel better when we receive them, they can have the opposite in effect. And then what I've also started to get very focused on are who are the unique prospects, right? Because you have the people who are going to like you and just because that's what they do. They see you like it, oh, it's Quincy, I'll like it, right? Don't listen to the video, haven't read the content, doesn't matter. But when you can see who are the people who are interacting and engaging in a very curious way, right? That's where you can really nurture, and that's the metrics where I'm like, okay, this is actually landing for the right people.
Right. And that's
Yeah.
everything when it comes to sales and growing your business.
Yeah.
So now we've talked about all the reasons, everything that you're going to lose if you don't speak up and stand for yourself. Let's talk a minute about what it feels like when you're about to do it. Like
Mm.
why you're really have that tension going
Mhm.
and you're upset that you're not upset, you're have trepidation about how it's going to be received and kind of
Yes.
move us through like what that feels like and how people can do it, right? Some
Absolutely.
tips in how to find your power and stand there in it.
Yeah, I think the first part about it is knowing that if it's not the type of, even in the most skilled way of handling maybe a high conflict type scenario or conversation, there's always going to be a feeling of nerves, right? Because usually you're having to address something that didn't work out in a way that was favorable. So that comes with maybe a little bit of palm sweating, right? You might feel your heartbeat increase a little bit. You might feel your throat starting to get a little tight. You may actually feel your body start to resist and want to actively look for other things to do to not have this particular conversation, right? To start to distract you because your body also wants to keep you in a space of feeling safe. Right. So my recommendation number one is before you have a conversation with anyone else, start internally with yourself. What is the outcome that you're looking for in the conversation? Because I do think if we can be prepared with knowing what is going to work for us and what is no longer going to work for us, that allows for us to move into the conversation with at least sort of a North Star, right? Of here's what we're moving towards. Now, in my framework, and I won't belabor you with that, but as you move through the process, and it's in a 5-step science-based process of approaching a structured conversation. The first part about it really is understanding what are the facts, right? Emotion can come in later, but really, where can we understand the facts? So that way, you and the person you're having the conversation with are starting from the same sort of shared pool of understanding. Oftentimes, where I see some of us go wrong is you may be starting at point A, and if someone else is at point S, well, we're coming from two different points, and our level of understanding may not be the same. But when we get to the destination, it doesn't feel good because it still feels like something's missing, right? So starting with the facts, then I always say, let's shift into understanding what is your perspective and what is the impact of that, right? So if the scenario happened, what was it and how did that impact you? What did it prevent you from being able to do? How did it have an impact on your business? Did it have an issue with your schedule? What happened? Right. And what's hard about that sometimes, Deborah, is that's where we also have to make sure that we are bringing the vulnerability of ourselves into that conversation, because it's easy to sit back and say, well, you said you were going to do this, and this, and run down a laundry list. But when you have to stop and say, hey, you told me you were going to deliver on this. And because you didn't, now that delayed me being able to do X thing, which then put me in a bad situation with my client, right? That's a much more robust and clear move through what has happened. Then I say, once you've done that, that's where you stop talking and we allow for the other person to come into the conversation. Because what we don't want to do is a monologue, right? You want to bring them in. You want to open an invite space for them maybe to share something that you weren't aware of. Did situations or circumstances, did their schedule change, right? And if it did, okay, is this a one-time incident or is this something where maybe we need to look back and say, the original agreement that we held or that we came to, it's not going to work because you've had some changes. How do we now go back and make some more adjustments? And that's where you're doing that R, that reflect and reframe of my Spark framework. Then ending on that K, the kindling collaboration. So if we can figure out a scenario to where it's just this one time thing, we're not going to have to worry about it again. Great, no problem. But if the situation has changed enough to where we can no longer hold to the original agreement, well, then let's talk about how do we properly sunset the relationship, right? And it may just be for that project. We're not talking the entire time unless it's a more of a personal relationship. But if you cannot figure out what's going to work, well, we know that this relationship and this iteration of it is not working. And I'm someone, I don't believe in ghosting. I don't think that's fair to either person. And I think you should be able to express to someone why we can no longer work, right? And I think as you move into your leadership or an entrepreneurial journey, the networking feels big until you realize it's small. So you don't want to have a reputation as someone who doesn't, provide people with opportunities, or you just ghost partners, or you just things just sort of fall through with working with you because you don't know how to sort of close those things off. And I think as we moved into having so much technology to support us and move us through things and make us feel connected, we feel like there's an infinite amount of people, like I can just sort of set that person away, pick a new one, put them in their space, and it'll be okay.
Oh, it doesn't
No,
work that way, does it?
it doesn't.
I have also found that a lot of times people speak up, they get brave and they speak up about it or wherever that is happening in their business, and they haven't thought about the solution that they
Hmm.
want.
Yeah.
And so now it just feels like you're just bitching. You're just
Yeah. What
complaining
do you want me to do?
because you can't even start the conversation about a solution because you haven't thought about it.
Right.
And it's up to you. You're the one
Absolutely.
that has it.
Yes.
So you need to think through what is the perfect solution to what you're about to talk about.
Absolutely.
And if you've done that, now at least you have a place. And if you gain perspective from that conversation from the person you're communicating with, now at least it starts to feel
Mhm.
more like a collaboration and coming through together. And it's going to be much more successful.
Absolutely. You're spot on because I think if you're not in a place of understanding what the solution is, right? And sometimes I give an example of it could be something as simple as washing the dishes, right? Like we have a lot of multi-general homes, right? And who's handling what and what are the responsibilities of the household compared to what may be outside. And if the person who's supposed to be doing the task and the person who's giving the directive of the task, right? If there isn't a level of understanding between both people, then it feels as though there's this attack that could be happening sometimes, right? And if you notice when you're talking with someone, sometimes they'll start to like truly like recoil back from you, right? They're pushing back, they're becoming defensive because they're feeling attacked. And I think it's always incumbent of the person who is bringing that conversation to also keep the conversation safe. So when you see that person is starting to respond and it's going more emotional, the need is to bring them back and you stop with what the unmet expectations may have been and just say, "Hey, I want to make sure that we're both feeling okay in this conversation. Are we still good to continue to go?" Right? Because you also don't know the mental space that someone else may have been in before coming into the conversation. So I think
And if they
also,
haven't met your expectations, what's happening in their life? Give them the opportunity to connect and explain.
mhm,
And so then
that's
you
that
have
A.
that perspective.
Yep, the asking for their input, and you would be shocked of how many people are hesitant to ask someone else about what may be going on with them. And I truly believe it's because once you have that additional information, it may require us to make a different decision based on that additional knowledge, right? You have more awareness.
Mhm.
And sometimes that can be the challenge of why I say, are we asking or are we assuming?
Or
And
telling.
or telling. And that
Yeah. That's
doesn't work
never a good
well.
thing. But
It's never a
in
good
that,
thing.
if you're upset with a vendor, it's easy to get in that mode of,
Mhm. Mhm.
but you have to circle it. You have to really collaborate to find a good solution. And thinking
Absolutely.
about what that solution is going to be is important.
It is, and I'll tell you this too. If you can go into this with a solution in mind, the science of structured conversations of what I know this is tells me that you're over 70% more likely to walk away with the outcome that you actually want if you know the outcome that you're looking for going in.
Percent. I mean, that is the whole, it's gold.
Mhm.
I want to kind of transition into talking about the aftermath of speaking up. What happens when someone finally does speak up and it doesn't go the way they want?
Yeah, that's a tough part because what I try to remind the people that I work with and the clients that I have is that the same way you may have learned to drive a car, ride a bike, become great at your social media, or maybe you're a master at Excel. You had to practice that. You had to develop the reps. And so for me, in the program that I run, the first part of it, if you just, sort of come into my ecosystem, so to say, is we go through a 5-week journey with each other. And I chose 5 weeks because I want you to be able to come and then go back out and try, and then come back and tell me, how was it when you tried? Right. Because for a lot of people, it'll be their first time really speaking up for themselves in this type of way. And I want people to have sort of a soft place to land, because it will feel unfamiliar most times. If it doesn't go well, I'm always a fan of, there's no need to beat yourself up, right? Because we can always go back, and assuming, right, regular sort of sane, safe situations, okay, that we're playing in. You can always go back and make amends if something went wrong, right? And also sometimes it may have went wrong in the way that we thought we wanted to deliver it, but to the other person, it may not have even been that big of a deal. Right. So also making sure that we're appropriately like tempering our expectations. But I think when it's a situation to where, if it's a devastating situation, it's always best to just, number one, stop and take a breath. Realize when the conversation started to derail, where should I have stopped? Right. Because if it is a situation to where it is highly emotional, it is a heated conversation, I'm always a fan of, give it 48 hours, right? Set it and like take a 48-hour break, but you have to come back to it, right? Because then once you show that you can follow up, but you can create the safety for both people in that moment, then that allows for when there is another tough conversation you want to have with that person, they know that you're still going to keep being safe at the center to where they can share and connect with you, rather than it just feels as though this attack, this monologue of everything that they didn't do correct and everything that you perceive that you did well. Because again, when you have to stop and ask for that input, sometimes as bosses, leaders, entrepreneurs, we are running with 50 tabs open in our head, and you thought you may have shared, hey, I need you to do this, or I thought I sent this email. And guess what? The joke's on you because you didn't do it, right? But now we know something wasn't done. And it's like, okay, I got to come back and sort of fix it. And then also create space for people can come and say, hey, I didn't get what I needed from you. It's a
It
two-way
is.
conversation. Yeah.
And I think the pause, the 48
Mm-hmm.
hours, can be really critical, because I talk a lot about sales psychology and buying personalities, but that's true in everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
Someone that's a skeptical buyer is a skeptical in all aspects of their life. It's not that just when I buy stuff, I question it.
No. Yes.
That's their deep personality. And
Mm-hmm.
people, all of us, it's a hard conversation for you that you're starting and bringing. It's hard for them to receive it too. And
Yes.
oftentimes people will have kind of a knee-jerk reaction, and they come around full circle to your way of thinking if you take the pause
Mm-hmm.
and give them time to think about it and consider it and run things through their mind. Now, there's always people out there that run it through, and I wish I could have fought back, which hopefully the
Yeah.
people that we're dealing with aren't in that mode.
Right. Right.
But the reasonable people that also want to do business and want to collaborate and be together, they're going to think of it and eventually come around to seeing it from your perspective. Not everybody, but the ones that do, you come back and now you've got a closer connection. You trust each other more
Mm-hmm.
because you were able to have that conversation
Yep.
and come out of it not defensive and with a solution to the problem. That is so defining. But if you
Mm.
don't pause and you just keep being mad and you don't give it
Yep.
that breath,
Just
and
let it breathe
48
for a
hours is a
moment.
good amount of time
Yeah.
to let them have it and for you to come back and reconnect in a positive way.
Because you know what, Deborah, and I think you hit on something that's spot on right there, is a lot of us do not process at the same speed, right?
That's a fact.
And so also I recommend that if you are going to go into sort of a difficult or high conflict type conversation, also maybe giving that person an advance warning, like actually scheduling time, right, to speak with them. So they understand there's a level of seriousness and preparedness that I want you to have in the conversation. I think catching someone off guard with something that, can be a challenge oftentimes isn't fair because you haven't allowed for them to come to the conversation best prepared either, right? So as you think about, I'm going to schedule this conversation, and then here's the things, maybe some bullets of what I would like for us to address. That allows for them to be in the right state of mind, right? And then I would say when it's that high conflict of saying, let's also set it aside for 48 hours because if they're someone who processes a little bit slower, it might just be overwhelming. So always just giving them what they need to show up at their best self as well is to me also the mark of a good leader. We don't want people who
And
are bullies.
right, and
Mhm.
time to
Right.
digest and give them grace so that they have that time. Most
Absolutely.
people take a little bit, and we make better decisions when
Mhm.
we take a little bit more time
And it
to
and that's
actually.
okay. I think, we're in this space of, there's so much that can be done immediate and it feels like, everything is sort of like, in this microwave culture that we talk about a lot. But I would much rather have the people who work with me or if they're considering working with me know that I am a leader and a person that can be patient with them in those moments. And you don't have to always show up as perfect. And if we're both open to, the feedback and the coaching that goes both ways, it really
Yeah,
can
because I'm
allow
not
for
gonna
some good
show up
relationship.
perfect every. Yep,
And
I'm
please
not
don't
gonna show up
expect me
perfect.
to. Yeah,
Right. I mean, today may only be 40%. That's the best I could
that's
give,
the best I
but it
can
was
do.
40%. Some
Right.
days I'm on it with 110%,
Yeah,
but that's not every day. And you
that's not
can't
every
base
day.
what you expect from Deborah on that day
Absolutely.
because that's not day in and day out every day.
Mhm.
Have you ever had a moment where you spoke up and then you questioned if it was the right move?
Oh, yes. Who hasn't?
How did you work through?
Gosh, it's so funny. So, this was many, many years ago when I was still in my corporate role at the time, and we were having some emergency situations across sort of the building that we worked in. And at the time, I thought it was a smart idea if people would let me give a little bit of background. The person who had the emergency was having a baby. We could not access her phone to say, hey, we need to get your husband, right? So we were trying to find an emergency contact. That's the background. And I was like, well, it seems like it would be easier if when people come into the building, like maybe they just unlock their phone. So if there is an emergency, we can find their ice person. Well, once I realized how silly that sounded, right? To think everyone's going to unlock the phone and then why does everyone want to be privy to sort of everything in the phone? I realized, okay, maybe that's not the best idea. So, but it did haunt me, right? For like a week, I was just like, God, I can't believe I said this in this huge meeting. Well, while I'm sitting here thinking it's at the top of everyone's mind as they see me, everyone else had moved on with their lives and were no longer like worried about this conversation. But for me, it felt like this heavy albatross around my neck because I was so embarrassed. And so what I had to really resolve myself with is that I was coming from a good place in my heart. My intention was good. So that's what allowed for me to move forward with it. But I did go to, one of the leaders I had at the time and said, yeah, I think that, as I think about it now, maybe that was a little short sighted. And I provided a different recommendation. The different recommendation was implemented and it held true and it supported what we needed. But I think we all have those moments where you speak up and you say something, you're like, that sounded better in my head than it did coming out. But I think sometimes we focus so heavy that we think that's the only thing that people know about us. And I truly believe that if you are delivering more positive, right? When I think about either it's your brand or the way you interact with your clients, whatever that may be, those consistent positive deposits you make into your overall brand reputation, if it has to take a hit one time, right? That's a one-time occurrence. It's out of the norm of how I would normally show up. So for them, it might have been just, Quincy, that's so silly. No, that's not going to work. Right. And then we were able to move on. So I think sometimes you have to be willing to let it go as well and not think that that's the only thing that people think about you.
Oh, and that is so important. Some people will just sit and ruminate it in their minds
Mhm.
and beat it up over and over. And I spent a good fair amount of my adult life doing those types of things and then watering myself down afterwards so that I didn't ever feel that way again.
Mm.
And then I found emotional regulation and changed my life in my
Right?
seasons, right? And you're like, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
now I'm connecting with people. And if we're in a brainstorming situation, bring out all the dumb ideas because,
Helps
boy,
me get to the good one.
it does. It
Yeah.
does. You got to get the log jam of it
Mhm.
going. That's the whole movement of
Absolutely.
ideas. And so, look, it stimulated you to come up with the real good
Yeah.
idea that
Yeah.
came later. So that makes
Absolutely.
perfect sense. Thank
Absolutely.
you for sharing
Oh, it's
that
my pleasure.
story.
Yeah. And Deborah, I think that's part of the reason why I'm so passionate about the work I do because I've seen, conflict when it's handled well and you can lean into it and understand that, sometimes there will be disagreements. And that's okay. But I've also seen where conflict has been handled very poorly. On my end, on the receiving, I could have been the giver. I've seen it, growing up in personal relationships, but also professionally. And primary reason I think about it is because it's not one of the skills that we teach. The way you sit down and you learn how to do 2 plus 2 in school, no one ever sat down and said, hey, here's how you deal with conflict. Besides saying you just don't fight, right? Some people say, well, you
Oh,
don't
right.
fight, or, certain households saying, well, we don't argue here. Well, what does that mean, right? How does that we handle conflict? And so I'm just on a mission to say there's opportunity in conflict if you're willing to bring a little bit of vulnerability into the conversation, really talk about what is the impact rather than just the result of what did or did not happen, and really looking forward to what are those opportunities to solution with a win, what feels good for everyone involved.
Right, that compromise,
Mhm.
and it's so critical to have good leadership and to
Absolutely.
really trust that I can sit down and you and I can have a discussion. We can come to an agreement. We're reasonable
Mhm.
adults that's
Yes.
beneficial for both of us and meets both of our goals.
Right.
So great, great advice. And gosh, already to the end of our
I know.
conversation. It
I
went
feel
so
like we're just
fast.
pulling back the onion of all the things that we could talk about.
I think that you and I could have a really long conversation, one of those
Yeah.
big podcasts for the whole
I'll have to
day.
come
And
back. I have to come back.
definitely, definitely. I am certain that my audience is interested in learning more about you and your show. If you could tell us how to find all of that, that would be
Absolutely.
fantastic.
Absolutely. I would first recommend them just to go to my website, experience-coaching.com. And there you can keep up sort of with all the events that I'm currently having. I'm doing my Conflict Clarity Lab, which is a 5-week live Zoom experience just to help you get to the idea of understanding that you can handle conflict in a different way, in a very safe environment. I love to have leaders, new leaders, entrepreneurs in there because oftentimes we're really good at the skill and the thing that we do, but we haven't really thought about, how do we develop those interpersonal skills that it requires when you're really thinking about leading your business from the front, right? And then I would say I'm across all socials at Quincy_coaching. And I would say follow along. I'm always sharing tips, tricks, thought starter questions just to really get you motivated in thinking about, are you advocating for yourself just as much as you're advocating for those around you?
Fantastic. And I will
Mhm.
link to all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on. And if this conversation resonated with you, if it challenged how you think about leadership, communication, or the pattern showing up in your business today, then my work lives on beyond this podcast in your growth. Thank you. I help business owners understand the human side of how they sell, lead, and make decisions. Because when you understand what's happening underneath the behavior, everything changes. So if you're looking for a place to start connecting in a human way, I have a free resource called the Human Sales Playbook. It's a guide that walks you through how to approach sales in a very grounded and sustainable and aligned way without feeling salesy.
Mm.
So you'll be able to find a link to that in the show notes, along with all of the other links to find out more about our show. Thank you for hanging out and listening. Quincy, thank you so much for coming on the show. Such a great conversation. I'm so
Thank you,
thankful you were
Deborah.
able to find the time.
I appreciate you so much, and I'm here whenever you need me.
All right, everybody. Until next time, stand strong in your power, especially when it gets uncomfortable. See you next week. Yay, bye, we did it.